Amazing. Well, thank you everyone for joining the last session of the February Manager Challenge. I'm super excited that we're going to be joined here with Brian Robbins for an AMA style, the first 25 minutes. And Brian, the last 3 weeks we've been talking about all sorts of different topics related to leading teams, from coaching to giving feedback to performance management, building trust, the full gambit of leading all remote teams. And appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I'm going to pass it over to Jim for the first question.
All right. Good morning, Brian. So a company like GitLab that's in hypergrowth, a lot of opportunities for personal growth and development, and be curious just over your career, kind of how you've thought about promoting folks from within an organization. What kinds of things do you look for?
Absolutely. So thanks, Josh, for having me today, and thanks for everyone for joining, and thanks for all the great questions in the doc. Great question. And so, when I look to promote someone, typically, I depend heavily on my team. And so if it's a direct report, they're typically promoted almost to the highest level they're going to be at. In fast growing companies, if I leave, then someone maybe can take my role in a succession plans. But if you're the principal accounting officer, you're at the highest level. So a lot of the times I really depend on my directs and sort of assessing performance. When you look at the development plans as we go through high potential employees in the organization, you can really tell the team members who have set themselves apart, who take on additional responsibilities, who are able to drive change within the business, who are, create change in a very collaborative way, which is really important. And so if you create change with breaking a lot of glass around the organization, that's not necessarily the kind of change that you want. And so you really try to look for characteristics of people who can be promoted to continue to drive that change at the next level to add value to the company. And, I do that, by my own self-assessment, but also look, to my leaders as well for their input, and then also go outside the organization. So it's like a 360 to understand people outside the organization as well, how they view those individuals and what impact they're making on the company as well.
Thanks.
Romer, you have the next one if you'd like to verbalize.
Yes. In your experience, Brian, what would be the 2-3 skills that an aspiring manager should develop or improve in order to become a great manager and leader?
Yeah, great question. Let me take this from a CFO perspective, and I'll apply it to sort of regardless of what role you're in. And so I'll look at it from an accountant, and I'll look at it from a lawyer. And so let's take the lawyer first. When you first graduate law school, you're basically spending a lot of time, reading and writing briefs, and you're a lot of time. And then, you're actually, maybe you're doing litigation, or you're doing some kind of other law. Then eventually when you make partner, you actually have to go out and sell business, and you're still practicing law, but most of your time, you're actually making an impact on the firm because you're actually selling the business, bring business in. Same thing is, thinking about an accountant. You're an accountant, you join a firm like KPMG, you're going into companies, you're doing audits, you're getting into the weeds of everything, you're understanding everything around accounting. Then you make managers, so you're leading people, so you're program managing the people that used to do what you used to do. And then you get to a point where you're a partner, and most of your responsibility is client relationships and selling business. And so, not unlike any other role within the company, you think about IC to manager to sort of business impact. Think about that as you go up the career ladder, sort of where you need to be at. And then also, it's important to note that you may be a superstar in a certain role, but that role may only be a manager level role. Like within a company, it may not go from manager to senior manager, director to vice president, to senior vice president, to executive vice president, to chief whatever, just because that role within the company may only be manager level. And so, one thing that I always tell people is make sure that whatever you're in, you understand that your aspirations are aligned with that role within a company. And then the skills you look at is the ability, the versatility of the individual to be able to go from an individual contributor to sort of a project manager to a people manager to driving, cross-functional impact within a company. And if you think about that evolution, that's sort of what you can think about from what I'll call career trajectory. And if you see people cross certain types of careers, that sort of applies almost to any position that you can think of.
Okay, excellent. Thanks.
Hans, would you like to verbalize?
Yeah, we had a session on performance management with her name was Liz, wasn't it? Tisdale, and the other day. And I'm just curious if it differs fundamentally at a senior leadership level compared to first line, and if you have any insight on how that changes as a first line manager goes up the ranks, let's say.
Yeah, so there's every company has their own compensation philosophy, and so when you talk about performance management, you're talking about I guess there's two things that you can actually talk about here. You can talk about the variable compensation component, or you can just talk about the strict performance management. If you're talking about the strict performance management, there's one company that actually had a really good, by level, there were sort of expectations. And so, senior leadership definitely did differ considerably from first line management. And it's really similar to question number 2 that Romer asked around, the characteristics that you look for in a manager or a leader and what that career trajectory and profile looks like. And so a senior level manager, someone on the E group, you're looking for someone who is, has a lot of external relationships, can understand all aspects of the business, can drive change across the business and lead large cross-functional projects, can make an impact to the financials of the business, is responsible for the P&L outcome and so forth. If you're an individual contributor, the performance manager of that is going to be more in management by objectives. It's going to be more MBOs. What are your quarterly goals? Is it getting out this set of code or meeting these specific objectives? And so it's going to be very, very specific. When you think about bonus systems, which are very similar to performance management systems, an IC typically is 80% their own sort of performance and 20% company performance. And then when you get into senior management, it's usually 80% company performance and 20% MBO, because your impact to the company should be that much. And so you can see how that sort of flips. And management level is sort of 50-50. That's not our compensation philosophy here. Just because we have a different philosophy, and every company has different philosophies. But I just point that out to tell you sort of the difference between the IC and sort of E group level type person on sort of how the impact is expected on company versus individual contribution.
That's very interesting. Thank you. The background behind that question is primarily because we're such a fast growth company. I mean, what level of expectation is actually realistic, or what's a stretch, and how do you measure performance? And it's something I feel that management at GitLab at the line level, it's a topic. So that was the background. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would encourage everybody to lead those conversations with your managers, right? And so if you don't have the conversations, you'll either be pleasantly surprised or pleasantly disappointed, right? And so I would encourage everybody to have those conversations, and all managers across the enterprise should be having conversations around performance. with their team members. And if they aren't, and it only happens once a quarter or twice a year, then it's not happening often enough.
Great, thank you.
Jim, you're next.
Yeah. So, what do you look for as the kind of the non-negotiables, most important things when you're thinking about hiring someone? I know it's a hard question because there are a broad range of things, but they're usually a couple of key things I find folks look for, and I'm curious what you might.
There's, to me, culture is number one, right? And so if you have a extremely talented individual who's extremely smart, who can do incredible work, but they culturally don't fit in, it's just not going to work out. There's under no circumstance has it ever really worked out in my experience. And so you have to make sure that there's a good cultural fit. And so, when you get, when I interview someone, competency, career trajectory, all that's like table stakes, like all that has to be done. And so really now it's about culture and ambition and what they want to do. And so, I am, most of what I really want to, really focus on is will they culturally fit into the company? And then I always like to ask the question, and it's amazing the answers you get, is where do you want to be in 1, 3, and 5 years? And I call it the Mr. Potato Head exercise. And so I don't know if everybody had the Mr. Potato Head when they're little kids growing up, but it's basically you can create whatever you want to create. And so I said, if you had a Mr. Potato Head or Mrs. Potato Head, and you could create any job you wanted to in 1, 3, 5 years, where would you want to be and what would you want to be doing? And it's amazing. People would tell you like completely different careers than what they're interviewing for. And so you're like, nope, or they'll say like, I want your job in like 8 months. Nope. And so there's some really interesting questions that you can ask that will talk to you a lot about the individual. And then the other thing I really like to get at is, understanding what they drove in the organization, the impacts that they had. And if people say we or the team or, and can never say what they did, then it's to me, that's a flag as well. So number one is culture. Number two is, what do you want to be when you grow up, Mr. or Mrs. Potato Head exercise. And then three is like, what are your accomplishments that you drove that you're most happy with, and talk to me about that.
Thank you.
No,
Romer, I think
no, in my case, Brian, was almost aligned to what Jim asked and what you said. So we can move to Pilar. Thanks.
Sure,
Absolutely.
thank you. And thanks for making the time today, Brian. I was curious to know if you could walk us through an example of when you had a team member or multiple members that were underperforming and how you were able to either help them get to their goals, so meet their performance metrics, or readjust their responsibilities.
Yeah, so I'll answer this two different ways. One way is, I get asked to mentor a lot of sorry about that. I get asked to mentor a lot of different people, and I walk through this process and I sort of made it up myself, and it seems to work, so I continue to do it. But I ask them to go do some soul searching of where they want to be personally and professionally in sort of 1, 3, and 5 years, and to come up with 3 to 5 bullet points, personally and professionally for each of those time periods, and for them to actually be measurable and objective goals. And, that's really, really difficult for people to do. And, typically it involves a lot of tears and, deep discussion and sometimes career changes. And so when you're going through the mentoring, sometimes people think they want to do something, but they do it for the wrong reason. And so when someone's underperforming, you try to find out the reason why they're underperforming and find out if it's just a good fit. And so if the fit's wrong, either try to find them a different place within the company or help them find a place outside the company. But if the fit's right and their heart's in it, and that's really what they want to do, then you help give them the capabilities and tools to be successful. And and sometimes that's easy. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's some self-awareness things. There's a whole bunch of different ways. It's really a case-by-case basis, but I think the important part is recognizing it, addressing it, and having the conversation. And those discussions are always tough to have, and people tend to put them off. But putting them off always creates situations that are more dire and less desirable. And when you address them earlier, the person receiving the news is always more appreciative, and you always have better outcomes for both parties. And so I'd encourage you, if you have, individuals in your organization, that you could feel could be performing to a higher level or underperforming, is to have those discussions, and to be, to have very productive, positive conversations with them. They don't have to be derogatory or negative, but come with concrete examples and come with observations on how to improve, and invest the time in trying to make them better. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised on what you'll get out of it.
That's great. Thank you. I think Sean has the next question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so GitLab has, so thank you for joining us today, by the way.
Absolutely.
GitLab has grown very quickly from being a small startup to being a public company. So, part of that is small teams working closely with each other, using the latest technology, delivering quickly, to we're now pivoting towards enterprise customers, long sales pipelines, federal customers, quite a different atmosphere. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on how managers can help team members transition through these changes.
Yeah, so as the company grows, we've brought on team members who've been there and done that, who've had experience operating, sort of at these levels, which is great. And then we have some team members who, they're operating at a scale that they haven't seen this before. And so to me, I think the number one thing is regular and active communication. And so, I always end my team meetings with, does anybody have any questions, concerns, or comments? One of my favorite sayings is, surprises are only good, during the holidays or birthdays. Surprises at all other times, people really don't like. And so, if you think something may be wrong, or you think someone should know something, whether it's true or not, communicate early and often. And so, I think when you're a public company, the stakes change, right? Because you have to report quarterly, you have compliance, Sid and I sign, things every quarter that if they're wrong, we're personally liable, and we personally can go to jail, and personally, all of our financials can be taken away. And so we have a high dependency on all team members at the company to make sure that everything's done right. And so, I always want to know if someone thinks something's not working, or something could be done better, or, if there's something out there. So, I guess, I would just say communicate early and often. Failure is okay. Like, don't create a culture where, failure gets punished. Failure should get recognized, and, it should be good. Encourage people to talk to one another. If you have new team members that are struggling, or people in your team that are struggling, or who haven't operated at the scale, try to help them, in areas where you may see that they may need help. But it's, it takes everybody in the company to actually do that. And so thanks for asking the question. And yeah, I would encourage you to do it and also encourage others as well.
Thank you very much, Brian. Great answer. Jim, I think you have the next one.
Yeah, so this is kind of a follow-on to the question 6, I guess. If we've gone through all that development effort and we've really worked with the team member, how do you think about at what point is enough and we need to look towards a separation?
Oh, this is always so tough, right? Yeah, everybody hates to do this, but it's evident, right? I've gone into a lot of companies. I've been brought into a lot of companies taken public. A lot of those companies have been sold. I knew GitLab would go public, and this is a very special company, and look forward to a really, really bright future as a standalone public company. But as a leader, if you have a difficult employer, if you have an underperforming employee, that employee is doing 2 things. One is they're impacting other team members, right? And so other team members are picking up the slack for his or her, underperformance. And then 2, your credibility is at stake, right? And so, one is I think you should have empathy as a leader and try to, rectify the situation. But if it's just not a fit and it's just not going to work out, you really need to be decisive and deal with it.
Okay. I think we're, so just quickly, 1 or 2 books that have really influenced your leadership style. Any recommendations for the team?
I peeked at this and I'll be truthful. I'm not a big book reader. And so, I learn more from other people and what they do and talking to people, and so there's really not, books that books I try to read them, but they put me to sleep. And so I'll pick up a book when I want to go to sleep. But, I think at the end of the day, it's, be humble, have lots of respect, learn from others, and and just be a good person, right? I mean, it's not really difficult to be a good leader, and and watch and observe and so forth. And so I've tried to do that throughout my career, and I learn more from observing others and actually taking that in than sort of reading a book on hey, here's the 5 keys to leadership, because they can be applicable to almost anything. I guess we used to have at one of my old companies, we used to have a lot of speakers come in, and there was a speaker, a couple books that I have read that I'll talk about, but it's been a while ago. One is called It's Your Ship, and it was a Navy captain, and he was given the worst performing ship in the Navy, and he basically empowered the people on the ship to make change, opposed to following the Navy protocol, and they became the best performing the best performing fleet in the Navy, and actually changed almost everything around in the Navy. And when he left, he actually said a few words, and you could hear a pin drop on the boat. And he basically said, you either leave to tears or cheers. And he said there wasn't a dry eye on the boat because everybody sad he's leaving. And when they do the switch out of the commanders of the boat, if everybody's cheering, they want you to get the heck off the boat, right? And the guy who, when he came in, gave like a 30-minute speech, everybody's yelling and everything else. And so, to me, it's pretty amazing if you empower the people around you to drive change within an organization, how much change you can drive. And if you think about, he had all, what was, perceived in the book to be the misfits of the Navy within this fleet, but they actually made radical changes to become the best fleet in the Navy. And it's a super easy read. You can read it just like that. That was a really good book. And then Harvey Mackey is an individual that is a really he's a New York Times bestseller. He actually wrote a book called Swim with Sharks. He, I learned something about him as an author when he came to speak, and the book's interesting, but he's fluent in 5 languages. He's almost at like a professional grade tennis player. He's a CEO of an envelope company in the digital age, and he has all these other things. But he is like at the height of everything and all these verticals. But he has like coaches and all these, and he still takes tennis lessons. He still takes speech lessons, and still does all this stuff. And it's actually pretty amazing. And the thing, it's the thing that you sort of learn from that is like, innovate or die, learn or die. And so, you constantly need to improve yourself. And there's a number of different avenues that you can actually do that with. And so there's a lot of good books out there. I would say leadership in general is, more for me observing, but there are some good books out there where you can pick up some interesting things around philosophy, around leadership.
Thanks, Brian. Do you need to head out? We're right at time. I just want to be sensitive.
I know we have one more question. Let's do the last question. They did schedule me for another meeting in 4 minutes, but let's go through the last question and then we're good.
Yeah, this is a hot topic, and I'm afraid it's probably not a quick answer, but I was curious what tips you had for maintaining a good work-life balance for yourself and also the team member. And kind of the place I'm coming from, some context is obviously this current pandemic has brought a lot of extra challenges in that balance. So, for example, when team members are out of the office, when you need to step away because you're not well, is there anything we can do to navigate that and hopefully lessen the impact on those additional workloads?
Yeah, this has been a topic at eGroup, and it's also been something that I've personally struggled with. Just because last year we took the company public. We've added a number of people to the organization. I mean, this year alone, we're going to add 1,000 new team members to the company. And so, we're, a hyper growth, super dynamic company. And so, it's tough, right? Because there's just a lot of stuff going on. I guess some of the tips that I use, I don't do them that well, but I can tell you some of the tips that I use. I try, I'm on the East Coast. I try not to start my day meeting wise before 9. I try not to have meetings after 5. I try to block 30 minutes in the morning for email and Slack, 30 minutes in the afternoon for email and Slack, and an hour for lunch for impromptu meetings, walk outside, email or Slack. And so there's sort of 2 hours a day built in for that. I have tried to carve out, I believe it's an hour and a half to 2 hours a day for my team. Just because I really want to, have meetings with my team to help develop, mentor, and guide. And whether I have one-on-ones, team meetings, or what it is, I want to have that time. And then the rest of the time will be filled up with key meetings, group reviews, AMA, investor calls, all that stuff. And so, that's what I try to do. It's really managing your time and prioritizing. And so I try to do it through calendar management.
Got it. Thank you.
Hope that's helpful. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for all the awesome questions. If I can be helpful on any follow-ups, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate you spending time with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Everyone could stay on.
Thank you.